and I will let everyone in. Can I pass the torch of letting everyone in to you, Amanda? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Very much appreciated. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Founder Friday number 2. This session is called Resources for Resilience, where we're going to take you through a whole bunch of amazing people that are accessible to you through Foresight and for your ventures in order to help you become a more resilient entrepreneur. Today, as I'm actually going to start with a short presentation from me because I was a Foresight entrepreneur, and I basically want to, I guess, lead with some vulnerability for you all. And really, help you understand why my business failed and I now work for Foresight, and and how you can avoid that kind of similar fate. And so just want to start with a acknowledgement that the lands on which Foresight operates are the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the First Nation, Inuit, and Métis peoples. And there's also a website called nativeland.ca where you can look up your neighborhood and see whether or not it's unceded territory. So yeah, today, why I lost my startup. And then we're going to have a feature from a Foresight partner, Collectively Tangled, and Kira, a mentor feature. So mentors, for those who don't know, are individuals who volunteer some time with Foresight Ventures, kind of at their own capacity, to their own limits, to work with the next generation of clean tech entrepreneurs. And we got Ernest speaking there. Janet is our executive in residence feature. Janet is actually, Janet, I'm going to let you introduce yourself because I think every time I say that certification, I say it wrong. And so I know you're going to touch on it in your presentation, but Janet's extremely well certified in this area. And if you want to take some of your Foresight dedicated or funded hours and use them towards meeting with Janet about, the things that you're dealing with as a founder and the stress that you're dealing with, that is an option to you. And then we also have two other features as well. Lucy Cullen, who's a founder friend of mine, and I know has also gone through her own entrepreneurial journeys that she's going to share a little bit about, and the practice that she's built out of it. And then we have a special feature as well from, I think it's Sonia. I hope that's not wrong. If I pronounced it wrong, Sonia. But from Heart Vista Performance, and she's got this really awesome methodology as well, including the use of wearables, which I thought was really cool, and wanted to share with everyone. So that's what we're going to take you through today. And then we're going to have some networking, depending on how many people in the room, I'm not sure how many breakout rooms we'll do, or we'll just stick with the Q&A. We'll see how many of you are staying on live. All right, so, oops, no, that's skipping ahead. That's the good stuff. So I'm going to take you through, this was my company really quickly. This is what we did. Basically, Binberries was a non-toxic powder that helped people compost by getting rid of the odor and the fruit flies that come alongside composting. And so it was basically a powder that you put in your compost bin with your food waste, and it mixes in there. And it actually changes it to an aerobic decomposition method, which doesn't smell terrible and get all acidic and awful. It also reduces the methane that's being produced by the decomposing food waste, and was really good for composters. And so I started selling this at farmers markets in Victoria in 2019. And so you can see from this deck in the top left there, this is a 2021 deck that from a investor pitch that I did. But basically, we had this amazing market of condos and households who are now increasing the use of food waste bins and making it mandatory. So it was a really great market for the product. And we really quickly took off and jumped up to 400. Actually, we went to 500 retailers across Canada in all these big names. And we're doing really well. So well that we had, very big eyes, which I'm sure many of you founders do that are in the room. And we were making it cheaper. We were able to continue to reduce the costs of manufacturing by scaling up our venture. But we were largely operating out of a old wood shop that my grandfather gave me when he retired. He was a carpenter. And as you can see, this old Foresight logo here on the right, that's a retro. Looks like it's from the 70s now to me. And yeah, we were winning lots of awards and things were going really well. I got a deal on Dragon's Den. I think I might do a Founder Friday one day on actually sharing what that was like as well, because I now know a ton of founders because I called all the founders who had deals on the show as research. So I got this great network there that I want to bring to the community as well. We had lots of great systems for accountability. We had this awesome team, different people doing different things within their skill sets, really quantifiable impacts for the environment, a patent and intellectual property. We were scaling our production, and yeah, so that's kind of just like a sneak peek at how things went before they didn't go as well. But basically, let's jump over to here. Why did my company fail? As you can see, the list was quite extensive, and they are, as you can see, excuses that they could include, but I'm nevertheless going to read them off to you. Because these are the kinds of things that and that I told myself when I made myself a victim as well. And that's something that every founder and everyone kind of does to some extent. But excuses for why my company could fail, that I could go out and say to the world, and I'd have lots of evidence or whatever, but none of it would matter. But I wasn't supposed to say that yet. Unfair practices by my retailers, 120-day payment terms, negotiating in bad faith and not following through on their orders. My distribution partners and I sold each other. I sold them on how easy my product was to sell, and they sold me on how wide and great sales their distribution network and the great salespersons they were. Wow, we were sure to convincing each other things didn't go. Obviously, they didn't sell the product like they thought they could. I didn't feel that the business conditions for Canadian manufacturers as a hard tech company were very fair. And I didn't get the grants that I thought I would get, and that we were aiming for in order to actually run a manufacturing facility at a reasonable cost, and one that could justify our margins and our product. COVID-19, I started my business during COVID. Great call, Tay. No, I'm not. I'm just being hard on myself. The war in Ukraine had a significant impact on my supply agreements because of the rising cost of fuel, and because of those supply agreements, my retailer didn't order, because my price went up. So and there was nothing I could do without. I'd lost the ability to make profit from the sale of my product, because of the cost of fuel, which was kind of a wild. Yeah, I wasted a lot of time pitching investors, VCs, big funds. I did a great job getting myself in the room, but ultimately, if I'd done enough research, I probably would have realized that some of these VCs I pitched weren't actually going to invest in my venture, because I did not fit their true profile and criteria, but I was chasing whatever money I could to get my company. I did not raise enough capital in my first seed friends and family round. I raised $300,000. That is not enough to launch a consumer packaged brand in Canada. I did not really realize that. And I should have chased that harder and that information much harder from the get-go. And I actually should have done more discovery on a commercial market application and a B2B model that could have built the scale that would have allowed me to do the B2C model. I did a great job convincing people to help me instead of going out and paying for a true subject matter expert to help me with what I really needed. Consultants are so expensive. It's the idea that as a startup would ever hire a consultant was beyond me. Like, I couldn't even fathom it. But the truth is, if I'd had a retail brand consultant or a retail consultant who'd done that exact business before, I would have understood how hard and tough it is to make margin in consumer packaged goods. And it would have changed what market I chase with my product. I did raise that 300K, and I felt this pressure to deliver a 10x round to my investors, because that's what they're all chasing and that's what they want. And as a result of that, I had to grow at a certain pace. And when things weren't going in that way, I panicked, and it was stressful and it was awful. And at the end of the day, because I was trying to grow so quick and do so much, we were racing our burn rate instead of focusing on our core business fundamentals, which is that this is a machine. I'm supposed to put money in, and it's supposed to give me more money out. That's what a business is at the end of the day. Okay. I cut my own pay before I cut my staff's pay. That was against my EIR's advice. He was very upset with me, but I did it anyway. And that, led me to conditions that were later, I'll get to in a minute. I did a lot of selling on charisma and my own personality. That's great, but I don't scale, as it turns out. I don't scale as a person. And so I can't talk to every single customer, and I can't be in every single store at every single booth. And I don't want to be. And I'm realizing, and that was hard to realize that, because you know, I had to, you basically, you have to build a system where someone else can do it. Otherwise you're locking yourself into, I guess, there's a concern that you might be the only person. And yeah, I did have some like sales staff that did a really great job. And they helped us immensely. But at the same time, I feel in retrospect, I wish I'd watched the product sell itself more, and watched it grow from word of mouth more. And it did. Like I heard, neighbors and other people would come to me like, oh, I just tried your product and things like that. But at the same time, and like, so I got some word of mouth, like it felt good, but I guess it wasn't obvious, and it had been obvious. Like it had been like, and if I could go back in time, one thing I really would have done is put, I don't know, a $2 off coupon in every single package that they could give to a friend. I've built more of a referral model into my company. I think that would have made a big difference. But nevertheless, yeah, both my co-founders and my company lost their moms. That was not something that I ever expected or planned for, and was really hard. And obviously, I gave them every bit of time that I possibly could. It was never a kind of a demanding relationship that way. But similarly, my grandfather's health was failing, and it wasn't appropriate for me to have staff going to his old workshop anymore. And so I had to move the company, and it was this immense growing pressure that my family was kind of putting on me that it was time. And I ended up signing a lease for a facility in Abbotsford. I say under duress because the realtor was threatening to pull it from us right away, and I had to leave the gym and read the deal in the car on my phone and then sign it in order to like secure the deal, which was all bullshit. And I later learned, and they can't do that. But either way, I did it, and I went home and told my girlfriend. I ended up breaking up with her and moving to Abbotsford in order to do it. And I made these decisions without talking to my executive in residence first, which I think was a huge mistake, because when I did talk to him, he was pissed. He was really pissed at me for making the decisions without talking to him first, because they were big, big decisions. And as it turned out, right after signing the lease, my co-founder proposed to his girlfriend, and she's American. He needs to get a US green card. And according to US visa restrictions, he's not allowed to work in the United States, but he's not allowed to leave the United States for 6 months. He can no longer cross the border from Seattle, where he was, into Abbotsford to open the facility like he was supposed to. So that's why I had to go. That's why I moved over there. But basically, I had this attitude that if I sacrificed enough myself by moving to Abbotsford and putting myself in this unhealthy condition, there was no kitchen. I lived in the office with my cat. I didn't go to the gym. I stopped eating healthy. I started eating out. And I basically called this the kiln. I'm gonna either break inside of it or I'm gonna come out harder. And boy, did I break, guys. Holy cow, I broke. I lost my balance. I basically, when things started going wrong for the business, I started acting like a cornered animal. I let fear and panic like basically completely rule me in those final days. I was eating out every day, so I was having beers at the bar every night, which is bad, which is terrible. I put on a ton of weight. I started my business at 200 pounds. I ended it at 250. And thank God I'm back down to 210. I'm very happy about that. I've lost most of it while working for Foresight, thank goodness. Anyway, the point is, I just want to share all this with you because, where in all these reasons is the real reason that BinBreeze failed. And it's my attitude of self-sacrifice. It's the fact that I thought I could, throw myself under the bus and survive it in the name of, I don't know, maybe it was a romantic idea, following through on my initial promises to my investors. The reality of the situation, which is that we had to pay for a factory. And I felt like if the business couldn't afford its factory, then it, like, what else can I do? I did everything I could. So I guess in all of this, what I want to say is to the founders that are watching this today or later on, when they're in Foresight, is treat yourself right, value yourself, and understand that resilience is not something that you are. You are not resilient. It is a skill. You build this skill by building healthy habits, by building regimes, by having hobbies, and by being a balanced mental individual. Not this crazy founder, I'm a founder paranoia that, I don't know. It was like a mental hat that I feel like or filter that I've taken off and I can see again. And it's like, oh my God, why would I treat myself like that? So I just want to, that's what I'm leading with today, because basically, these are all these incredible resources that you're about to hear from that are open to you and available to you through Foresight. Nothing in life is free. But if you're going to be this founder that you think you can be, where you can go out and raise this huge money and be this CEO and have this huge team and scale this venture, boy, you're going to need help, like professional help, because I did, and now things are much better for me. I actually signed my insolvency paperwork last week. I'm very sorry to say. This is a great thing. I didn't have any assets when I started my company. So it's really not a big deal. But at the end of the day, for me personally, because I started with this with like student debt, basically. At the end of the day, just understand that you are worth investing in. You are worth paying for help. We have some help here that's volunteer help. It's limited and everyone has their limits, but it is something that's available to you just to help you get started and help you realize that you do need it. But either way, this is my message to founders: get help. Okay, so with that, let's get started. Oh, James, you want to have I'll let you have one question, but this is not the Q&A period. All right, all right. One question.
Well, I was just wondering, if you had to do it all over again, what would you change?
I would have gone for a commercial market opportunity, because I could have saved property managers a ton of money by getting their waste picked up less often, because it costs them a lot of money to, like $1,500 every time a truck comes in. But I didn't chase that. We tried to pivot to it at the last minute, but my heart was already broken and I was already off balance, so I couldn't do it. So that's why, if I'd been more resilient, I think there could have been still a business and it could have survived. In fact, for everyone listening, just for the curious, Binbreeze is actually now in the ownership of my largest investor, which I'm really happy about, because he's a wonderful man and he's running the business with his son now, and they've started selling it again. So I also get to know that my baby lives on a little bit, which is also really great. I'm doing everything I can to help him, even though I didn't make any money. So yeah, there you go. There's the end of the story. Also, I get to help other entrepreneurs now through Foresight, which is I've discovered is actually incredibly fulfilling. So is that good, James? Okay, cool. You can ask me more questions at the end. So let's go to Kira. Oh, there we go. I just had to ask you to unmute. I apologize.
Perfect. No worries. Thanks so much. And great segue, actually, my presentation. So I'm just going to share my screen. Nice to meet everyone. I'm Kira Gillis. Can you all see that?
Yes, we can.
Screen? Perfect. So I'm Kira. I'm a therapist, a social worker, and I'm the co-founder of Collectively Tangled. And at Collectively Tangled, we combine our expertise as mental health professionals along with our knowledge and experience, both working with founders and being founders ourselves, in order to provide mental health services specific to innovation in the startup sector. So I'm going to ask everyone a quick poll, just internally in your own heads. Hands up who here has a body. And I guess most people are like, yes, hopefully. So congratulations, you all have physical health. When we say the words physical health, what are the first things that come to mind? Just feel free to kind of, in your head, think about it. Generally, when we ask people that question, first things that come to mind when they think of physical health are things like exercise, eating well, getting enough sleep, usually the first things that pop into people's heads. Now, hands up, who here has a brain? Hopefully, most of the time, some days, yeah. So congratulations, you have a body and you have a brain, so you all have mental health. When you think of mental health, what are the first words that pop into your head? Take a few moments to think. So generally, when we ask people that question, the first things that pop into their head are things like stress, anxiety, depression, burnout, which isn't that interesting, that when we think about physical health, we think about the skills and tools to help promote strong mental health, or strong physical health, sorry. When we think about mental health, we go straight to the negative. And part of that connotation is what keeps us stuck in not looking after our mental health. And so at Collectively Tangled, we make a big effort to call mental health what it is and call it by its name. There are a lot of words that get thrown around, like resilience and psychological safety and burnout and well-being, work-life balance, that all are a part of mental health, but sometimes we're really reluctant to name what it is. And we really want to change that relationship with mental health at Collectively Tangled. So when we talk about mental health, we're talking about having strong mental health, which is having the tools and knowledge to move through challenges. And there are three really important truths that we hold true when we talk about mental health. So first, we all have it, and it is inherently neutral, just like physical health. You have a body, you have physical health, you have a brain, you have mental health. Two, our mental health is something that we can look after. It's also something that we can neglect. And just like looking after our physical health, it's a process, right? We don't eat a single piece of broccoli and go, that's it, I'm healthy, I'm done, right? We have to eat broccoli at least every so often. We also don't tend to judge people who are taking time to prioritize their physical health. And if someone says, I'm taking time out of my schedule and prioritize paying for a gym, and twice a month I even go see a trainer so I can use their expertise to be stronger and get stronger faster and safer, we don't judge them. In fact, we usually find it commendable. We don't see that as an inner lacking in any way. When it comes to the process of looking after our mental health, it's not some mystical, magical thing. It's also not about avoiding stress. It's again about having those concrete knowledge and skills to maintain strong mental health and cope with stressors. And so mental health is, and a part of, impacts everything that we do. Our relationships, our work, our physical health, our well-being. And also similar to physical health, mental health exists on a complex continuum. And it's influenced by a lot of different factors, including individual, our genetics, family factors, a lot of those things, Taylor, that you mentioned, and things that, right? Those are all things, some of those things completely outside of your control, right? Some of those things we do have influence over, but all different things that come together to impact our health. And so when we talk about mental health, one thing we really like to emphasize is that looking after our mental health doesn't take away from capacity, it adds to it. And so you are your number one asset. You are your business's number one asset, and you are your number one asset in life. And would you let your business fail, or other things that are important to you fail because you're not looking after it? Generally, the answer is no. And so we really, really encourage founders to look at themselves and look at looking after themselves as maintaining an asset. And this is, so looking after yourself is a part of looking after your business. And this is really supported by research and science. When we look after our mental health, we make better choices, we absorb information better, and we see things differently. So, a lot of people have that experience when they're in a really stressful situation and they're adding to the to-do list. And then afterwards, they've had a pause, they've had a chance to go back to baseline. And they're like, why did I think that X, Y, and Z had to get done today? Really, these are nice to have, they're not necessary, but that's part of how stress works. And so looking after our mental health actually allows us to go faster and for longer, and a sustained faster, not a, out of control kind of spiral faster that sometimes can feel even appealing at times in those moments of stress. But unfortunately, that's not how mental health is always talked about or seen, especially in innovation spaces. Even in spaces where mental health is discussed, we often hear it talked about in kind of a, yeah, it's important for everyone else. Or we hear its acknowledgement, but it's not really followed by any real or tangible action. We know that grind and hustle culture is still really prevalent in innovation. And we're often given messages like, well, if you're not burnt out, are you even trying hard enough? And we find that stress and being busy is really glorified. But again, that doesn't mean it's helpful. It's not a helpful state to be in for your business, your team, or yourself. So we use this car image to really drive that point home. Which car do you want to be? Which car do you think is more sustainable, is going to go longer? Probably the one on the right, which again, that car doesn't just magically be red and shiny all the time and fast, right? There's maintenance, there's fuel, there's things that have to go into that to make sure that car on that right stays how it looks now. The car on the left, probably not going pretty fast, right? Probably not going really far. But it's a common thing we actually hear from founders we work out, that if I'm not burnt out and stressed, well, people think I'm not trying hard enough. Will I be judged for looking after or prioritizing my mental health? So looking after our mental health, it's backed by science, and it's also backed by business. So there are really positive returns on investments when individuals and businesses prioritize and invest time, effort, and resources into mental health. You know, like Taylor was saying, nothing is free. Everything has a cost. Doing nothing for our mental health has a cost. And to look after our mental health, we do have to invest into it. Again, whether that's our time or energy or our resources. And here's a really, really important factor, especially for founders. To see these ROIs, leadership on a team has to be engaged in mental health initiatives. In fact, it can have a greater impact if just leadership is engaged than initiatives that only focus on the team. So we all have mental health, and we all agree now that looking after mental health is a part of looking after ourselves and our business. How are entrepreneurs doing in the mental health department? And unfortunately, entrepreneurs in Canada do experience mental health concerns at a greater rate than the average Canadian Canadian, and face significant barriers in accessing supports. What's really interesting is if you kind of first ask Canadian entrepreneurs or founders, how are you doing? The answer is somewhere along the lines of like, I'm fine, or busy but good. Then you ask deeper, and 62% of founders report feeling depressed once a week. It's interfering with their ability to work. It's about half. It's impacting their work-life balance. And 80% of leaders report exhaustion typical with burnout risk. And if you're a woman or a member of a diverse community, we see these impacts increase. And so when we talk about entrepreneur mental health, where it's like burnout and stress come up a lot. So now that you're all convinced looking after mental health is important, I want to make sure you all get to walk away with some concrete knowledge and skills to help increase that resilience and look after your mental health. And so stress tends to come up a lot, stress, burnout, when we talk about mental health. And let's get really clear about what stress actually is. So it might surprise you, but we encourage founders to befriend stress, or at the very least, get to know and change their relationship with stress. And so while stress can be an emotion, there's also something we all have called a stress response. And that is a physiological response involving our brains and bodies. And it happens when we encounter some kind of stimuli, which can be external, something happening around us, or it can be internal, our own thoughts. And our brains and bodies perceive that as a threat, which triggers a stress response. And our stress response is actually pretty predictable in most ways. And so how we see that stimuli shapes whether or not our stress response is initiated. And that perception is shaped by our experiences, our beliefs, how we're feeling in a given moment. So if you're well rested, feeling good versus being tired and hangry. And a hard piece about stress is when we're in a stressful place, we are more likely to perceive something as a threat. It's an important thing to know about stress. And then again, that stress response, it releases hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, this pre-programmed response. It changes how our brain operates, right? So when we're in a stress response, we're more likely to think of what could go wrong. What are the negatives? We're less motivated on rewarding behaviors, like going to the gym, things we know make us feel good. We feel a lot of tension often in our muscles, right? Like sore jaw and shoulders is something that a lot of founders report when we work with them, that they may not necessarily connect with stress. And those really are our bodies giving us tools that work in the short term. So not all stress is the same. The stress response system is supposed to go up and down in waves. It's a system that's supposed to be turned on and off. So there's a stressor, we perceive a threat, it turns on. Again, it tries to give us tools to react to that threat. We deal with it, we respond, it turns off, we return to baseline. And so that describes positive stress, right? Let's say we have a really big meeting with key stakeholders, right? Stress response turns on. That what if, thinking of the negatives, that can be positive in the short term. What are the questions I haven't answered? What are the things that might be missing from this presentation? What are some questions or concerns that they're going to want me to address? I'm not as motivated on to seek out, rewarding activities. So I'm going to skip gym. I'm going to say, no, can't meet up for drinks. Sorry, I'm going to focus on this. I'm really honed in. Some of that adrenaline, cortisol really helps me focus, tune everything else out. I deliver the presentation, it goes great, or it doesn't, but I'm able to, commiserate with my co-founders. I return back to that baseline, right? That's positive stress. I'm learning, I'm growing through those experiences. We also have things like tolerable stress, right? Taylor, you mentioned some of those as well, right? Dealing with losing family members or, poor health. There's nothing positive about that. We're not learning or growing through that necessarily. But if we have buffers, things that reset that stress response, we can still return back to a baseline. So that's tolerable stress. And then we have chronic stress or toxic stress, which is what leads to burnout, which is where that stress system that's designed to turn on and off stays on for a prolonged period of time, which is really, really common with founders, to the point where their baseline actually starts to feel higher. And all those tools that stress tries to give us that can be helpful in the short term start to have side effects that are not helpful. So one of the things our stress response does is it rewires how our digestive system works, which over the long term can create a lot of gut issues and stomach issues, which is one of the really common signs we see of chronic stress. And so we want to think of stress as a messenger that exists to keep us safe. It's trying to alert us of, hey, there's something here you need to pay attention to, and here's some tools to deal with the situation. And admittedly, those tools may or may not be helpful in a modern day situation, but we also want to make sure we don't get into a shoot the messenger type scenario. And we don't want to get rid of our smoke detectors. It's a little bit like saying, I want to get rid of pain. That might feel tempting in the moment, but pain exists for a reason. And it's really uncomfortable actually for a reason. It's trying to let our body know, hey, there's something you need to pay attention to. And so instead of getting rid of stress, resilience, strong mental health is about having the skills to recognize stress, assess, and respond effectively to what's happening internally and or externally. And so there's 3 categories of responses that can be really helpful to think about of, okay, what do I need to do? How do I move forward based off what the stress is telling me? First, we can change or remove what's stressing us out. The kitchen's on fire and the smoke detector's going off. Let's deal with the fire. 2, we can adapt our perception of the thing that's stressing us out. So if you have a smoke detector that goes off every time you shower, right? Be like, okay, steam, not a threat. Let's reset the sensitivity so that, every time I have a shower, it doesn't think the world's on fire. 3, we can use buffers to intentionally turn off our stress response and return to baseline. And so those are usually simple things that help us press that reset. I was making toast, or, I dealt with it. I'm going to press reset. So for a real life example, that can look like, okay, I need to change, or we'll use the shareholder meeting as well. Change or remove what's stressing us out. Canceling the meeting, probably not helpful long-term, but sometimes that stress might be saying, I need to put a bit more time and effort into preparing for this meeting. 2, adapt our perception. Okay, I'm feeling stressed about it. I have put the time and energy in, right? Maybe it's a matter of reminding myself, what can I control and what can't I control? I can control this. I can't control, the questions they're going to ask or how they feel about these things that are outside of my control. Could be an example of adapting perception. We can use buffers. So let's say, okay, I've prepared. I've done everything I can. I've looked at it. No, I'm going to go for a 30-minute walk. Instead of rehashing and going over and over my notes and thinking of what ifs, that's reached a place that's not helpful anymore. I'm going to use some buffers, return to baseline. So I'm in a place where I can actually, respond to their questions in a way that's helpful. And there's not a one size fits all. There's not a magic solution. And sometimes we need one of these. Sometimes we need all 3. It really, again, the emphasis is on having those skills to recognize, assess, and respond versus trying to find a magic answer that's going to work every time. Sometimes we need to cross things off our to-do list, and sometimes we need to step away from the to-do list. And again, it's about really kind of consciously engaging in that process. And so what can we do to build resilience both individually and within our businesses and within the innovation sector as a whole? First step is really being clear on how do we think about mental health and what are our attitudes and beliefs around mental health? Because if we're thinking about mental health even unconsciously in a negative way, that's going to get in the way of putting in the time and effort to prioritize our mental health. And so really want to thank all of you for coming to today, and conversations like this are a really important and powerful part of starting to shift those perspectives in a meaningful way. We also want to think, okay, if I'm thinking about mental health and mental health is important, I'm acknowledging, how do I bridge that talk into action? And behavior change comes from that value and perspective change. And so I really encourage all of you, when you leave today, Start thinking of stress as that messenger, right? Being like, okay, my shoulders are tense. I'm thinking of a lot of what ifs. Start to notice what are your stress signals. Maybe it's, I start blaming people. I start thinking of all the external things that are unfair. And instead of like going down that rabbit hole, I'm going to press pause and say, okay, I've recognized stress. Now I'm going to assess, what is it that I need? Of those 3 pieces, do I need to adapt or change what's happening? Do I need to adapt my perception? Or do I need to buffer this stress? And think, what is the action? How do you respond based off those 3 pieces? So that's wrap up really quick presentation for today. Again, thanks so much everyone for coming for today. Collectively Tangled, if you do want to get in contact with us, ways that we connect and work with people. So we offer therapy services, both individual and co-founder counseling. We have digital courses and workshops and trainings as well. So that's
Thank
my
you so
presentation
much.
for today.
It's awesome. And thanks for, just a lot of really, really great tidbits in there that I felt, man, I wish I'd had that attitude. Boy, thank you. That's
Absolutely.
fantastic. So yeah, I wish I could do the Q&A, but I do want to keep us to time. So hopefully you'll stick around and be here after. But next up we have Ernest. Ernest is a mentor with Foresight. So mentors with Foresight come in and they'll basically they're volunteers, but ultimately they have to set a limit on how much they actually have in terms of volunteer time. So they also have their own businesses and things like that, and they have that kind of freedom where an EIR can't enter into a relationship with you outside of Foresight. A mentor can. So I just wanted to give you that clarity because Ernest has been really fantastic and done a bunch of goodwill work with Foresight. And so I really want to acknowledge that ahead of his presentation. And I'm going to ask you to unmute Ernest. Sorry, I forgot. There you go.
Got it. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for that awesome introduction. Let me see if I can get myself set up here and then we'll go. All right. So hopefully that should be showing up on your screen.
Yes, it is.
Perfect. Well, first of all, hello, everyone. When Taylor mentioned this idea about to talk about mental health and mental resilience with founders, I loved it. I think it's such an important topic, and especially for people who choose to start a business, because at the end of the day, you're putting a lot on the line and the stakes are really high. So when I start working with founders, one of the first things we always make absolutely clear is that you are the asset, just like you've heard. Nothing good happens if you go down, not only from a business perspective, but also from your family and your personal life as well. If you're burnt out, if you're stressed out, if something fails, if you're scared, if you're feeling imposter syndrome, if you take a lost deal personally, it all has an impact in how you show up, how you make decisions, how you think, and how you communicate. So at the end of the day, you have to develop some form of mental immunity to get through everything that you need to get through as a founder. One key part of developing mental immunity is resilience. And resilience, in my experience, can only be earned through adversity. So today we'll talk about adversity and developing your resilience muscle. Let me see if this is going to work now. So my name is Ernest Barbaric. I work as an advisor and I'm also an executive coach. Previous to that, I ran a digital marketing strategy consultancy for about 12 years. And I also founded a podcast conference, a wilderness retreat for entrepreneurs, and a website development agency back when WordPress first came out. And there's been a few other projects here and there. On top of that, I also have personal experience with intense anxiety. I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder at one point in time, it was about 10 years ago. I went through a couple of bouts of deep depression where at the worst of it, I remember laying on the couch in our living room, shivering in cold sweat with my mind in a really, really dark place. I lost my mom in the middle of building my strategy company while also teaching at 2 different universities. And I suddenly lost my dad last year. That put me in a tailspin for months that ended up in severe abdominal pain that turned out to be somatic in nature and where I didn't think I was going to see this summer. I also worked with senior leaders who went through separation and divorce with 2 kids in the middle of a career transition. I work with founders who have to take care of their aging parents with dementia while also building a startup and having their own family to take care of. I work with a CEO who found out their company lost more than $1 million on a deal because their team was afraid to tell them about problems before they actually hit. So you could say that I've had some experience in the arena, and I'm still in the arena, and I'm glad that I'm in it with you. So today, let's talk about how to develop mental resilience. Now, I have simplified a lot of tools and concepts here, and there's a lot behind each of these, so just keep that in mind as we go through this short presentation. Most of us like to think of life as linear. We intellectually know there are going to be ups and downs, and we watch them on reality TV, or we read about it in a LinkedIn article. However, we still kind of cling to this idea that life and work being somewhat linear. It's a linear path that generally tends to have some kind of a positive outcome of some kind. Otherwise, why keep trying? We get into business with the hope of creating something better, and we expect a return on our effort and our investment. We expect that things will work out, and this is especially true with first-time founders. However, your life is not linear. We don't just go from point A to point B with everything working out exactly as we envisioned. Maybe it works that way for some people, but I still have yet to be one of them. Through your life and through your career, you will have many ups and downs. Landing that first deal, completing a certification, losing someone in your family, having a kiddo, developing an illness, growing your team, hiring a top performer that makes your life easier, and then having another top performer resign without notice. And then a few weeks later, getting into an acquisition conversation. It's not linear. The ups are great, but I find that it's often the downs that actually define you. How you handle yourself, how you manage your thinking, how you recover, and who you become as a result. You see, there's no replacement for direct experience. You can train, you can meditate, you can go to seminars, you can do visualizations, you can improve your chances of getting through a tough experience, but nothing actually replaces going through that experience. You build resilience by going through tough experiences. And today, we're going to zoom into a tough experience, and we'll talk about getting through what I call the hole. Here's what a visual representation of something that may look like. I'm going to split it into 3 stages, and I'm going to give you a simple tool for each stage that will hopefully help you in a moment should you ever need it. And those 3 stages are future forward conditioning, getting into the hole, and also earned resilience on the other end. So let's talk about future forward conditioning first. It's part of our culture to believe that it's possible to live in a world where risks work out. Unpleasant experiences and hard conversations can be somehow avoided. As entrepreneurs, we are really good at bending reality. We can imagine positive outcomes, we can set big goals, and we can start working towards them. That core ingredient of positive outcome bias, however, is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it helps you create things that didn't exist before because you imagined that they were possible. And on the other hand, it can also set you up for a crash when things don't go that way. As a preventative antidote, we need to take a stoic look at reality as how it really is. This is how you start building a future forward mental conditioning space. And that comes down to these 3 truths. Number 1 is that life includes pain and includes adversity. Number 2, the future is uncertain, no matter how much you plan and how much advocating or forecasting you do. And number 3, any kind of a significant accomplishment is going to require work and discipline. No matter what you do, you cannot avoid these aspects of life or work. And this will never change. Now, there's also joy and success and surprise and creativity and curiosity and elation, but those never occur separately from what's on the screen. And the question is, are you willing to accept this as our reality? Now, when I saw this for the first time, I had a bit of a visceral reaction. So I was thinking that, well, this might be true for others, but I'm different. I'm special. I can create certainty. I can get through pain that I choose to engage in. I can outwork any of my peers. My ego wouldn't let me see past my experience up until that point, until I hit a wall. And I have worked with so many entrepreneurs and so many leaders who also felt the same way until they hit their wall. And it could come in a number of different flavors. Losing a sale that they were counting on to meet payroll, finding out that they're getting sued for an improper use of a trademark, all of a sudden having to pivot to online sales and virtual work because of a pandemic. Maybe there's a board member that all of a sudden felt that they shouldn't be CEO anymore. A high-performing member of their team handing in a resignation out of the blue. And when something like this happens, you might just end up in the hole. So let's have a look at what that looks like. Mike Tyson has a quote that fits this really well, and that is, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. That's sometimes how this can feel. Sometimes it's a surprise, sometimes it's something that you expected, but it hits different when it's actually happening. Now, depending on the event, if it's the whole kind of event, something significant hit you, and it may have been outside of your control, you will have an emotional reaction. It might be anger, fear, anxiety, or extreme excitement, for example. And when emotions are high, your brain literally switches modes, if you want to think about it that way, in a response to perceived threat. Your survival mechanism gets activated. What physically happens is that more blood and oxygen flow to your amygdala, which is an older part of your brain, and that reacts to threats, and less oxygen and blood flows to the prefrontal cortex, which is wrapped around our amygdala, on the front part of our brain, where most of your logical and rational reasoning is processed. Sometimes we call this amygdala hijack. So if you want to think about it this way, if your amygdala is kind of in the middle here, it's wrapped around with the prefrontal cortex. When an emotional event happens, you literally flip your lid. And in this state, you will make worse decisions. You will not hear details. You may get really angry and have an outburst. So for example, it might be having a board member that criticizes you over a decision that you made in front of your team, and then you have a reaction and start yelling back at them. It could be calling your largest client and finding out that they signed a deal with your competitor without telling you, and then you have an emotional reaction to that. So how do you deal with this? There are lots of different ways that involve box breathing, meditation, leaning on your support network, rapid journaling to get the emotions out, and much, much more. That might be something that I would do first if I was in that space, just to calm myself down enough to actually start the work. And what I'm going to share with you is an approach that resonated with me. It's partially based on a book by Trevor Moawad, who is a sports mental performance coach working with elite athletes in very high stakes situations. So this is the approach that I would recommend in this case. What we want to do is initiate a shift to neutral. When you have an emotional response, when you're in the hole, you will likely have lots of negative thinking starting to occur. In this state, we likely don't have access to shift to positive thinking. It might be too much of a stretch, and we don't need to go that far. We just need to go from negative to neutral. Now, that sounds simple, but it's not easy. Ideally, with understanding the reality as it is with your future forward conditioning, we have accepted that life is going to have some pain. It is going to have some adversity. The first thing we need to do is accept reality as it is. This happened and it's real, and I cannot change the past. Now, it's also important to accept that the past is real, but it is not predictive. Your past doesn't dictate future outcomes. Your behavior does. So you can choose to shift your behavior to create different outcomes. Once our amygdala response calms down enough for us to get access to choice, you can start the work. And the work, what I've seen work really well, combines two things. One, a short time horizon, and two, behavioral activation. So what we want to ask is, what is the next right step? And the question that I might ask you if you were in this place is, for the next 20 minutes, what is the right next step? And it might be just going for a walk or calling someone. Then for the next 20 minutes, what is the one right next step? You can start collecting the data. Then for the next 20 minutes, what is the one right next step? Maybe you can ask someone for a different perspective. Whatever that looks like for you, that short time horizon and behavioral activation is one very effective tool that you can use to get yourself out of what I call the hole. So now let's look at the other end of the experience here. We're going to look at the other side. Resilience is defined as the ability to recover from setback, adapt well to change, and keep going in the face of adversity. It's basically a job description for an entrepreneur. And I believe, and my experience has showed me, that resilience is earned. And there's a very specific way that we have to look at these experiences in order to earn it. Most people, when they go through the hole, they just want to recover. They want to get back to how things were before, to get away from the negative experience, come back to homeostasis, and then keep going from there. Your brain naturally, in order to conserve energy, wants to find solutions very quickly. Things that have worked in the past that allow you to repeat those same actions again without having to think about them explicitly. And this is how habits get formed. And this is also how people get stuck in repetitive patterns. And this is also how many of us miss out on earning the lessons of resilience. We want to recover, adapt, and keep going. And what I challenge you to do is to go beyond a recovery. We tend to turn away from negative experiences and negative feelings. And what I encourage you to do is turn toward them. When you face your problems, when you face your adversity, you get the opportunity to actually see the gift in the experience, as hard as that may be to see in the moment. Once you have some distance, perhaps using that 20-minute tool that I told you about a little bit earlier, you can then turn toward the experience that you've had. So the question that we want to ask is, what did I earn through this experience? For some, it might be the courage to do outbound sales and cold outreach because that's the situation that they're in right now. For others, it might be finally understanding that someone on their team who has kids and aging parents, and then as a result, they create a more flexible working environment. For others, it might be choosing to adopt inclusive hiring practices so that people who normally wouldn't get a second chance do. So the question is, what did I earn through this experience? Let me go back here. So this is the way that I view earning your resilience muscle. There are 3 things that we covered that I hope will help you develop your resilience ability if you choose to practice them. The first one is having a pause and really thinking about accepting the reality is that life is going to include adversity and that future is uncertain. Number 2 is thinking about when you're in having that kind of an experience, what is the one right next step I can take right now, and going at it one step at a time. And number 3 is that resilience is earned, but only if you have the courage to face your problems. There was a book called How Resilience Works, and this really resonated for me as I was thinking about this. And so Diane writes that resilient people possess 3 characteristics: a staunch acceptance of reality, a deep belief, often buttressed by strongly held values, that life is meaningful, and an uncanny ability to improvise. You can bounce back from hardship with just 1 or 2 of these qualities, but you will only be truly resilient with all 3. Resilient people face reality with staunchness, make meaning of hardship instead of crying out in despair, and improvise solutions from thin air, and others do not. Now, I hope you found that helpful. This was a really short presentation on a really large topic, and I hope you'll get a lot of different perspective on this for the rest of today. If you want to connect with me, I'm always happy to connect. You can find me on LinkedIn or at ernestbarbaric.com. I hope that was helpful, and thanks for your time.
That was awesome, Ernest. Thank you so much. Really, I think I'm just gonna be a little emotional through every presentation today. All right, Janet. Janet, I do not want to pronounce your last name wrong. And I do it to people and I hate it. I hate myself after. So please, could you give us the full name?
Yeah, so I'm Janet Renica, and I'm, greetings from the ancestral traditional enunciated territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe. I'm based in Ottawa and also Elphin, Ontario. So I'm Center East, and I have a slide in my presentation that will explain all the various letters after my name and why I'm here as a FCPA, FCMA, so I'm a fellow, to talk about non-negotiable trauma-informed practices and approaches.
Awesome. Thank you, Janet.
So I'll just try to get, if it's going to go, perfect. Okay. So my practice is always to introduce the land acknowledgement. And so as we begin this presentation, I encourage you and invite you to just consider where you're located and what the beauty is in that. So I'm a former executive of the Federal Public Service. My home department was Environment and Climate Change Canada. I'm an ACC level certified coach with the International Coaching Federation. I'm an integral professional coach. That's where I grounded my coaching theory. So full body. We talk about bodies a lot, head and heart. So 3 components. I'm a certified trauma-informed coach. Trauma has been my journey. And I facilitate with the Cultivating Safe Spaces group based in Penticton, BC. And you'll hear a little bit about that, particularly in the world of climate grief and climate work that I do. I'm a climate reality leader. And for She Changes Climate, I'm the ambassador for Canada. So I do a lot of strategic finance in climate and ESGs. I look at the system. So you will see systemic lenses in what I bring forward in anti-racism and anti-oppression and what that means for trauma, and in climate and foundational ESGs. I do coaching, one-on-one, team, conflict coaching, and I do facilitation virtual and on-site. We have these little cafes that we hold monthly that are called climate cafes, and I'm here because my almost daily focus in every conversation I have brings up mental grief, but particularly grief, loss, and trauma. So resilience. I have the invitation for you to cultivate a safe space, and there are 4 necessary conditions to do so. The first, you can't get away with it. Without it, is understanding self. So we've heard a little bit from the previous speakers about present and the past and future. So where do we live? Where are each of you living right now when you reflect on the pressures you have in your individual businesses? And reflect on ideas and beliefs that stop us to being open to others. Practice love-based practice. Acknowledge each story you have in your life, yours, your ancestors, those that came before you, and be comfortable with embracing your character defects. Patience is the ability to remain calm and have tolerance when you're confronted with delays or trouble, and discipline, paying attention to what is important, be it self, community, your team, organizations, and the world. So you never know what someone is going through until you walk in your shoes. Have you heard that before? So in your startups, in your organization as founders, you might have a policy on, an employees assistance program, workplace wellness, values and ethics, responsibility in the workplace, hybrid workplace. Think of other things that you have guidelines and policies on, or that you want to get on, and be thinking, is this not enough so that we have resilience? What has changed? So I say it's a cultural evolution revolution. Each one of us is unique. Employees have diverse ethnicities, race, gender, sex, and identity work using intersectionality analysis illuminates how many layers are actually present for each one of us. And this is very important. So if you haven't looked at intersectionality, that's recommendation number 1. We all have diverse lived experiences from increasing natural and man-made disasters. We have increased communicable diseases and health risks. COVID is one such one. There's climate change. There's world conflicts and wars, and this has been going on for a while. We have pressure-filled business market conditions, increasing complexity, emergence in product and technology innovation that's coming faster than we can possibly keep up, and there are pressures. What else would you include on this list? that you would add to your lens of the cultural evolution revolution? So I'm bringing trauma into the space. It's an event that's outside one's normal experience that causes intense fear and can exceed one's ability to cope. So we heard about stress, responses to stress. And it is referenced as being a friendly thing. You know, we start accepting that we have stress. How much can you manage through those up and downs? Each identity layer that we hold in an intersectionality analysis can be subject to different type of events. What is normal for one layer may not be normal for the other. And remember, each of us are unique. So think of the people that you work with every day, that you live with every day, what your responses are and what others are. Where do they come from? Traumatic events can occur as a result of people's behaviors or actions, or as a result of natural occurrences. And people are regularly, increasingly exposed to trauma in the workplace, whatever that workplace is. Direct, by being involved in an event that's outside one's normal experience, or by being involved that is a repetitive experience in their life. So multiple layers of repetition bring an automatic trigger response, and trigger is about trauma. Indirect is by witnessing experiences of another person. So what makes a workplace experience trauma and traumatic experiences? It involves a threat, real or perceived, to one's physical or emotional well-being. At this point, I invite you all just to take a breath and just feel where that word trauma is in your body as I take you through each one of these points. It's essential to actually recognize whether you're feeling something and where it is and how it feels. Take a breath, clean out some space, and we'll continue. It can be overwhelming. It results in intense feelings of fear and lack of control, and it leaves one very helpless. It changes the way a person understands the world, themselves, and others. So how does it affect us if it's work-related trauma exposure? We can have vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, secondary traumatic stress, indirect trauma, PTSD, and burnout. We talk daily about PTSD. It's in the news all the time. Even burnout. What behaviors do we see? So I'd like to point out that all of these take energy from us. They extract energy, and the system is, the system basically says that that's the hero, that we are managing our stress, that we are, we ought not to get to burnout, get as close as you can. And when you're burnt out, you're basically extracted from your workplace, from the world you're in, and you have to recover. Is there another way to look at how we might work in the workplace? So Dr. Gabor Mate is based in Vancouver, originally from Hungary, and he asks, why not the addiction, but why the pain? So behind resilience, what's the pain? So the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is unrealistic, as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. So from a systematic lens perspective, we have a current system that is based on extraction. If one brings in Indigenous wisdom and theory, the system that they look at is one that is based on abundance. So how might we look at resilience from an abundance lens? And how might that shift what strategies you may want to consider in your daily life? So trauma can stem from all kinds of things. Grief and loss, we are all living it. There is not one coaching call that I have had in the past 3 years with individuals, with teams, with executives that doesn't involve loss of some sort and grief. And there are all kinds of other ways. So Ernest referenced the brain. I like the brain slides. I like to be able to give them to you. So the first one is when we're in survival state. That's the base level and asks, am I safe? And as soon as you get that, you have to create safety. How do you cultivate safety for yourself and those around you? Because depending on where you are, it can explode. The limbic system, it represents, am I loved? The only way to soothe an upset emotional state is through connection. And the executive state represents the optimal state. So that's the front part, and that's when you have all your oxygen. And that's where you get into problem solving and learning. And the brain state asks, what can I learn? So take a moment to reflect on, in your personal life, which of the 3 brain areas do you experience the most often? And take a moment to reflect on the causes. Is it survival state? Is it the emotional state? Or is it the executive state? And if you're able, share in the chat. Then take a breath. And in your workplace culture, which of the 3 brain areas represent your culture most often? Is it safety? Is it that people need connection? Or are you working in a problem-solving reality and everything is basically moving forward? So take a moment to reflect on the cause for survival, emotional, executive. My curiosity has always been, what's the alignment between how I live my personal reality and how I see and work in my workplace reality? So non-negotiable outcomes. They are non-negotiable for trauma-informed practices and approaches. It's part of our world. It's behind everything we see, and particularly relevant for those of us who have lived relatively, stable lives since COVID-19. So non-negotiable outcomes are about everyday acts. You can start small, try a lot of things and see what works and move forward with those and continue to innovate. So as founders, we are all innovative. Some of us take the high road and some of us take the small road. And Stanford Design School recommends that we take the small approach. So approaches and practices that I offer you is notice in the environments that you're in the conversations you're in, where is the rage, that angry undercurrent that you feel, that you see, and you might feel, and or the silence. People just aren't saying anything. So notice both. And move to share stories in circle. I have a feeling that it's not all very comfortable here. And so let's just start talking about it. What do you feel? When you speak, slow your speaking pace that too allows for reflection and greater understanding by the listener. The faster we speed up, the more it takes energy from us. The more we slow down, it brings energy to ourselves and also the listener, and can be an energy booster in this time of stress. I encourage a practice of mandatory breaks that include some form of body movement for oneself, one team, community, and the organization. An interesting one is meeting agendas. Update and review to include diverse perspectives. So you're holding a meeting. Could be a shareholders meeting, it could be your venture capital meeting, could be your team. How have you set up that meeting? Has it been the same way for the past 4 years, since 12 years? A partner at KPMG told me one day, he says, I just set up my agenda and it's the same thing. So I said, is it inclusive? Without inclusivity, one doesn't cultivate a safe space. So think of the different kinds of people that are in your organization. People that always come back to, these are the rules. They're the traditional type of people that like to bring you back to the policies and the way it used to be. Then you have those that are focused on connection, the relationship people. How are they seen in an agenda? us as innovators, I'm an innovator, although we're all founders here, we may not all be innovators at our first area in our personality, but innovators need space and an agenda, all conversations, to just reflect on, to be able to bring those big questions, the big challenges that they do. And of course, while I'm speaking in this slow pace, some of you may be saying, I want to get on to the next slide. You're the action people because you want to get through to the next one. So, which one, what would you like to do with your meeting agendas? And feedback. Bringing back, you never know what someone's going to do until you walk through their shoes. So how might you approach the way that you actually give feedback? Will you bring in pace and time and reflection? Or is it just, we have 15 minutes and it has to get done? And so how does the other person feel with a limit on their time, which is about the feedback you wish to give them in their performance? So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm based in Elphin in Ottawa. I'm actually going out west on Sunday. I let Taylor know. I'll be in Vancouver from June 3rd to the 10th. So if anybody would like to have a meetup, a coffee chat, I can arrange to do that. June 12th to 13th, I'm actually in Kamloops at the Cultivating Safe Spaces second annual conference. I'm giving a workshop, 3 workshops actually, repeat on climate work and climate grief. And the afternoon of the 14th, I'm in Kelowna. So I'd like at this moment, the invitation is to check in to your 3 parts of you, your head, your heart, and your body. Reflect upon one way your thinking has been pushed to awaken today in this 20-minute short, non-negotiable trauma-informed practices and approaches. Write it down and share it in the chat. Think about your own self with your teams and the organizations that you're involved in. So what we're really talking about is you can't go back and change the beginning. I, as a founder, starting, little consulting pieces before I went into government and worked there for 21 years. And now I'm back into my own organization again. I can't change the beginning, but today we can start and begin to change the ending. This is really a journey of learning, unlearning, and relearning, and it's very systemic. So I will share that we all are working in the capitalist system. It is an extraction system and it's fear-based. To work through trauma, all of the trauma specialists say the system needs to change. We need one where abundance is key, where people talk about love quite freely. And what that system is one that embraces belonging. So today, thinking about how this presentation may have you react, be kind to yourself for the rest of the day. And as you reflect upon what you'd like to do next, and if you have any questions, please reach out to me. And I've given you a number of resources that you can launch into to take advantage of the spare time that you may have, or the time that you will begin to allocate to understand a little bit more about trauma that we all hold in our current workplaces, from our families, from our ancestors that have been passed down to us, and that in spending time, we actually begin to understand why it is I'm reacting this way. It may not just be me today, but it may be the intergenerational experiences that have brought trauma to the forefront in my life. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you.
That was wonderful, Janet. Thank you so much. Yeah, really appreciate that. I know for me personally, my big takeaway was thinking about just how much time I'm spending with survival brain. Even today, there are times where I still, end up falling into that thought pattern. Yeah, it really does change. I also think I wish I'd done more time reflecting on how that affected my employees, how they perceived their salary when in negotiations and things like that, with that kind of survival mentality, and whether or not that's where they're at and things with their life. But anyway, that's just my aside. Everyone hopefully was doing your exercise and writing their own asides instead of listening to me. I will pass it over to our next presenter, Lucy Cullen. Lucy, I will then ask you to unmute. There we go.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi, everyone. All right. So we've had some really fantastic presentations so far, and I'm learning a lot. I've never seen an event like this before on this topic. So also, Taylor, kudos to you for putting this together, because it's a really wonderful variety of perspectives and experiences. So without further ado, I'll share my screen and we will get into it. So I'm trying to think of the best way, if I should do a portion of my screen. No, I will do this. Okay. Hi. All right. So I will introduce myself momentarily. I'm also going to put my LinkedIn in the chat if anyone wants to connect there. I love all the conversations in the DMs, so feel free to shoot me a message at any time. So, but who am I? I'm Lucy. I'm a 4-time founder. So I've connected with a couple of the entrepreneurs in this space over my time building businesses and also working in the ecosystem. So I started my first company 10 years ago. And very briefly, it was just born out of my own frustration of the amount of food waste that I saw every day as a server. Taylor talked about working in more like commercial food, and also my wheels were turning because I was like, it's true, $1,500 per pickup. Yeah. So anyways, that was my world with my first company, which was sustainability consulting. We helped restaurants reduce waste, save money. We were 5 years too early for the market. This was before everyone was talking about food waste in the food space, like 10 years ago. But yeah, and then since then I had a catering company as well as a dog treat business, and I'll share with you the story of what happened with my dog treat business, Earth Pup. And yeah, and I've also worked with, between like mentoring and teaching other entrepreneurs and how to grow their own businesses, very much in the impact space. So I worked at Spring for 2.5 years, which is actually how Taylor and I initially connected. And yeah, I've been also a bit of advisory with the Canadian federal government and United Nations on their models to support impact entrepreneurship. And I added this like fun little thing to my about section. I also play saxophone. So I play music. That is one of my hobbies. I actually just quit a 9-piece disco funk band to pursue, which was a lot of fun. If anyone wants to listen to one of the songs that I recorded on, I'll share it in the chat just for funsies. But I actually just quit that to pursue making my own music, which is going to be electronic, very Justice vibes. So I'm actually performing an open mic this weekend. And yeah, that's just a bit about me. And yeah, thank you for the applause. It's funny, some of the things that we're talking about today regarding mindset, I'm like rebuilding my mindset in music because I have it in entrepreneurship, but not in music. So that's a really interesting journey. Anyways, what we're here to talk about, I wanted to share my own story, kind of like Taylor did, which was very, very open and vulnerable, because I mean, disclaimer, I'm obviously, I'm not a mental health professional. Of course, I'm someone who's been through it, and my own experience completely changed my life and changed my career. And it's now my mission to make sure what I went through, no one else goes through, because if businesses are going to change the world and make it a better place, it's not going to happen when leaders and founders are burning out on their way to the top or getting sick or et cetera. So I'm going to put a very brief trigger warning, notes of self-harm as well as suicidal ideation. So trigger warning there. But yeah, so basically I was, Janet was talking about being more action focused in some meetings. Hi, it's me. I was very much the entrepreneur that's pedal to the metal, get it done no matter what, self-sacrifice, like what work-life balance, I don't care. I can't go hang out with my friend or that family member because I got to get it done. And I always worked like that. And, I also saw that as something to be proud of for a really long time. But not only that, it always felt like it was kind of the one-man fallacy of, oh, well, when this milestone is achieved, then I'll be able to calm down. When this happens, then I'll be okay. Like, then I'll be less stressed. That day never came. That day was forced upon me. And so I was building businesses throughout my 20s, and throughout my 20s dealt with a number of health issues because of how I was working. And it really, I mean, it was at its worst when I was running a CPG business. So my dog treat business, Earth Pup, which also worked in the food waste space. We took food that was usually discarded, perfectly good, and upcycled it into dog treats. We launched 3 months before COVID. So building a pioneered supply chain with a product that is not readily available or easily accessible in the market, brutal. It was brutal. We figured it out though. Like we got through it and we kept, the pivoting, but through that time, I dealt with a lot of health problems, but heart problems. I had burnt out and had to take time off work completely, but I just kept going back to working the way that I did. And I remember having a conversation with my doctor where I was like, I'm not well. I'm not well, and I don't know what to do about it because I was bootstrapping. I was bootstrapping. It was me. The things need to get done. The things are thinging. And I remember my doctor said to me, and I want to be very clear, this was well-intentioned. She did not know the experience of being an entrepreneur. She's doing her best to support me. So not bashing what she said, but she just went, can you do less stressful things? And she's like, well, can you just take some time off? And I was like, no, that doesn't really solve the problem at all. And also I remember being told like, oh, you just meditate and then, and then you'll feel better. Meditation is very important. That is a practice I do every day, but it wasn't really what I needed at the time. I kept going back to working the same way. And eventually what happened, and this is, the story gets harder. So Earth Pup, we dealt with blow after blow. There was so many issues with our supply chain that I couldn't control. We learned that we couldn't trust our manufacturer. We were in the middle of a production run. Our manufacturer fell off the face of the earth. I couldn't get a hold of them. And I'm not even kidding when I say I had to star 69, my own number, to call them. And my manufacturer was in the middle of a field on vacation. And then they wasted 50 to 60% of our production run. And we couldn't find another manufacturer. Then we ran out of money. And my sister, who was working in the business at the time, she had to let herself go because, that was so challenging because she had special needs as an employee. And so she was really and it's the height of COVID. It was going to be really hard for her to get other work. And I just took it on as like, this is completely my fault. We're out of cash. I don't know what I'm going to do. And that's when thoughts of suicidal ideation started to crop up. That I was like, okay, I need to figure this out. Okay. And basically what ended up happening is I remember it was 11 o'clock at night and I'm packing dog treats and I'm on the phone with one of our investors and a mentor of mine. And I was like, what are we going to do? I've spent months trying to find a new manufacturer. I can't find one. My only option is to open my own facility. There's a labor shortage in Canada, blah, 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 blah. And we came up with a really creative solution that wouldn't need a manufacturer at all, just a co-packer. And basically we had an idea to launch a product line in the health space for pets that would have been first of its kind in the world. Very innovative, super exciting. And so we're like, okay, let's go. And typical me, pedal to the metal, let's make it happen. And so I formulated all the products, all the packaging was designed, printed, supply chain, everything was built, ready to rock. And I went on a trip to Europe that I did for work because at the time I was working at Spring. And I went to actually go meet a bunch of tech founders that I was working with over in the Western Balkans. I traveled a little bit around Europe because I'm over there, make the most of it. And when I got home, all of a sudden I couldn't eat. I could not get food in me and I couldn't figure out why. Very strange. I thought I had maybe heat stroke. I didn't know what was going on. And I'm mindful of the time, so I'm going to try to keep this story a bit shorter. There's a lot of detail to this story though. So if anyone who navigates chronic illness wants to get into it, we'll hop on a call. But anyways, basically I couldn't eat for 2 weeks. I didn't get more than 200, maybe 300 calories in me a day for 2 weeks solid. So I lost a lot of weight. I saw 3 different doctors. They all said the same thing to me. Again, well-intentioned. They didn't know what was wrong with me, but they're like, oh, well, take a gravel. Maybe you're pregnant. I was not pregnant, something was very wrong. I wound up in the ER. And eventually, actually, a naturopath figured it out. And what had happened was I was navigating toxic mold illness. So I was exposed to black mold very briefly while traveling, because my partner was totally fine. I was traveling with him, but like my body just couldn't handle it. And so what had happened was my liver started to shut down. So like this is months of various tests and problem solving. And like that's, you know, me in this photo, like yay. And also the photo on this slide, because I got really sick. So after this diagnosis and various lab work that needed to happen with my illness, like I got sicker before I got better. So I had to go on medical leave. I had to go on EI. I could barely function. It affected me cognitively, my nervous system, digestive system, muscles, everything. And what was really interesting though, is my doctor said to me, she went, this is the straw that broke the camel's back. Your body was already under so much stress that it could not handle another thing. And it just shut down. And now I took that time to really reflect on how I was working, mindful that it was never sustainable. And when my doctor said to me, like, this was exacerbated from the stress you dealt with from work and how you were working, I mean, I learned my lesson in the hardest way, because I had to close my business down because I couldn't run it for like a year and a half. And so I really reflected on, okay, how was I learning how to be an entrepreneur? How was I working? And do I want to revive my own business, or do I want to work in a way that supports other founders to not go through what I went through and just work in a way that's conducive to more work-life harmony and prioritizing their well-being? Also kind of funny, this photo, I look really miserable on the right. I did not know my photo was being taken. And that's when my illness was at its worst. I think this photo is both funny and sad. But that's when everyone around me was eating pasta, and food was a big trigger for me. So I couldn't eat carbs or fat without getting like any type of fat, like olive oil, without getting really sick. So that's me being really sad I can't eat pasta. And I think that photo was like sad and funny. Okay, so basically all I'm saying, and I breeze through this because there's a couple slides that, you know, some of the amazing speakers today have already touched on, but basically I took that time to really look at how I was working, and I changed it. I just changed it completely. And it's now, like I said, my mission to support other entrepreneurs to work in a way that's conducive to prioritizing their well-being, through the lens of like the strategy and the operations, as well as the key entrepreneurial mindset pieces, in addition to, of course, like mental well-being and the support that qualified therapists provide as well. So I'm not going to go into the problem, but one thing I am going to really touch on, because I had this conversation with Shulamit Bear-Levtov, who's an incredible therapist. Excuse me. We actually recorded an episode for my podcast the other day, and it's not going to come out probably for a couple of months, but if anyone wants access to it, I'm so happy to share it, because I loved that conversation with her, because we have the same mission. And of course, you also have access to another amazing therapist who's here today. But we do have the same mission of supporting entrepreneurs, and I just happen to have the lens of like the business strategy side. And something that I did myself that I see a lot happening also with other entrepreneurs is, you know, implementing the self-care practices without shifting what's going on in the back end. Because if you've got an overwhelming schedule, an overwhelming to-do list, and it's like, oh my God, like we're drowning, and you know, meetings are not happening efficiently, then yeah, like if you're going back to working the way that you were working before, that's, you know, some of the other things that you're doing, although very helpful, again, I'm not discounting the importance of that, but it can certainly be improved, the overwhelm, the stress that founders are feeling when they shift how they are working. So that is like, that's really the two key areas that I touch on. Like I said, I touch on mindset with entrepreneurs that I work with, and then wherever possible, I do my best to refer them to other professionals that are more focused on, that are actually mental health professionals that can dive a little bit deeper into what they're navigating. You know, trauma was certainly touched on today, as well as other topics. So I'm going to breeze through a couple of, I pulled out a number of my favorite tips that you could take. I mean, take what resonates, leave what doesn't. Take one or two things, start to implement them, and test them out for yourself. I mean, this is not a one size fits all, but this framework, all I want to say for this slide is that, like, I made this for myself. A lot of the stuff that I touch on is what Lucy 10 years ago needed to hear. But I would encourage this framework to think of it like a checklist. Like, even if you like, I'll make sure that Taylor has the deck and you can look at these slides, but when I'm going to walk you through them really quickly. So restructure is restructuring how you work, analyzing what's happening in the back end, what's working, what isn't. And I'll go through some examples momentarily. And so starting there, if you're looking to change how you're working to be more conducive to the day-to-day lifestyle that you envision for yourself and you want to be happening. So it starts with restructuring and then integrating new practices or new tools. You know, I saw someone else using a Fathom AI note taker in the meeting today. I use Fathom as well. It's amazing. It helps me in so many ways and saves me a ton of time doing things manually. So I have a long list of automation tools if anyone would like that. But you're integrating new practices, routines, systems, tools, so that you're optimizing the nature of the work you're doing and freeing up more time in your schedule, and then further alleviating the overwhelm that you might be experiencing mentally. And then this is an important phase, is embody, because when we look at any practices that we're using, it's really easy to go like, okay, I'm going to check that off the list and I did it, go me. But if it doesn't actually bring about the feeling that you're looking for it to, like you're looking to feel in your day-to-day, that might be ease. For a lot of entrepreneurs, that might be more of a sense of freedom. Then it shouldn't just be a check mark that's ticked off. It should be like, you want to be having that feeling and embodying that. So it's just taking a moment to reflect on that. And then remind is the last one, because it's really easy to learn tips in a fantastic session like this and then move on and then kind of forget about them. So it's always great. I like to have a reminder in my calendar to take a beat, reflect on what's working, what isn't, could be monthly, could be weekly, and just be reminded of the tools in the toolbox. Okay, so I'm going to do my best to go through these relatively quickly. One thing that I am going to note is redefining success. Redefining what success means for you is really important, because I think as entrepreneurs, I want to hit this milestone, this revenue, like and it really pushes, it can be really challenging when that success metric doesn't unfold the way that we envision, and we can take it as, oh, I failed. And when we redefine what success really means, I don't have time to get into the story that I wanted to share for this, but when we redefine what success really means and opening ourselves up to creative possibilities, because when we envision like the goal that we want to get to is the top of the mountain, if we redefine success as I just showed up, the open mic I'm going to do on Sunday, my only metric for success is just showing up and do it, even if I'm completely off pitch when I sing. So I think when we start to redefine what success actually means and know that failure is just information gathering, it takes some of the pressure off, and we know that, okay, I did the best I could with what I had. And it makes you to feel a little bit better, honestly, through that. And then, like I said, I pulled out some tips from the framework. So you'll see these at the top, and when we're looking at mindset. Another big one, defining boundaries between work and personal life. This sounds so simple, but it is amazing how often we need this reminder, myself included. Turn off notifications. This is the number one that I actually find most people from this content they leave with. Turn off notifications. Like anything that is not absolutely time sensitive, we do not need work emails on the phone, Slack, social media. If your team needs to get hold of you in a time sensitive way, amazing. Set things up so that they know how to get hold of you. If a fire needs to be put out, a metaphorical fire, they can call you. But like that is going to also just help your brain to stop ping-ponging and not being productive. And then having start and end working hours is also really great, especially if you're working from home. Just having more boundaries so you feel like work isn't bleeding into all of your work or all of your personal life. A big one that I love is when tasks are complete, the day is done. So creating your daily task list the day before, so that when you sit down at your desk, you know exactly what you're getting done that day. You can put your blinders on, focus, make it happen. And then, it's happened for me that I finish my day at like noon because I finished all my tasks. I'm like, oh my gosh, go me. I'm gonna go treat myself to like a really overpriced coffee. So I think that's focusing on task completion as opposed to hours worked goes a really long way. And also like it gives you that little dopamine hit when you tick everything off and you're like, oh my gosh, I feel really great. And this was touched on earlier, but when you're stressed, do the next best thing. That is a tip from Amanda Northcutt, who she's an amazing founder she's battled Lyme disease twice. And that's how she deals with navigating that illness while also building a company. Okay. And one other thing I'm going to say, because I'm going to kind of zip to the end and wrap up. Because I think I spent longer sharing the story at the beginning than I meant to, but that's okay, because I wanted to share some of the details. So this is from the podcast episode that I shared, or that I recorded with Shula, the therapist that focuses she only works with entrepreneurs. And when it comes to your mental well-being, and just honestly getting through it, like this stuff is so hard, and just getting through it, ensuring that you have community, like this group that's here today is a big one, and also setting up your support system. I wish I did that earlier. I didn't. That could be coaches, mentors, therapists, friends, family, like someone's that's going to lend an ear and hold space for you in a non-judgmental way. That, like, having a game plan, it goes a long way, because then when stuff hits the fan, because it often does, then you know what you're going to do. I'm gonna zip through the rest. Oh, and one last thing that I will say, because I like this tip, is for any well-being practices that you have, make it just as important as your other tasks on your list for the day as work. So like a walk outside that's 10 minutes, similar priority to emptying your email inbox. Because that also ensures that on those days where it feels like there's so much going on, that still happens. Yeah, I'm gonna zip through to the end. I'll leave this up. We're testing out entrepreneur personas when it comes to well-being. I do a lot of data collection, and I'm starting to do a lot of data collection with some other partners in the ecosystem when it comes to well-being as an entrepreneur. So this is a beta. If you want to take a quiz, this is totally optional. It's like 1 minute, and then a worksheet will be sent to your email I did one prompt per persona on well-being. You can scan it, do the QR code. It's kind of, honestly, makes me think of a BuzzFeed quiz a little bit, which is kind of fun just because it's so short and sweet. But yeah, I'll leave that up, and
Awesome.
let's see what other links. And that's kind of it. That's kind of the time, but I'm happy to dig more during the question portion, and I'll put my email in the chat as well.
That was really awesome, Lucy. Thank you so much for sharing that story. And yeah, just the importance. I just think it's such a fantastic and relevant story on the importance of health and resilience. And actually, one thing that I didn't have covered today, we have one more speaker, but and I don't think that this is going to come up, but it might, is perceptions of investors in your company on your resilience and whether or not they're going to invest. And how are you showing that you are a resilient and balanced individual? Because that's someone who they want to invest in. Like, there's this idea that, we're this hustler culture. Do I really want to invest in a hustler who's actually doesn't have any boundaries? I don't know if I do. I actually don't know. But anyway, food for thought. Let's go to our next speaker. Sonia, I pray that I'm pronouncing it correctly as Sonia. I've just asked you to unmute. There we go.
You are. It is Sonia. Thank you. Thanks so much, Taylor. Real honor listening to all these presentations and being on this panel. I love all the perspectives and the information shared. Got a lot out of it myself as well. So as Taylor mentioned, my name is Sonia, a little bit of weird spelling, I know. I work with executives and entrepreneurs, teaching them how to use their stress as a catalyst so they can perform at their best and build resilient, high-performing teams around them. So we know mental health is big, right? Like, we hear a lot about it in the media. Recently, a Harvard Business Review published findings that entrepreneurs who are able to manage their mental health effectively are almost 40% more likely to report higher levels of creativity and innovation, which is directly influencing their business growth. So today I want to dive into resilience. We're going to do a deep dive, and I'm going to show you how to break that cycle of anxiety and overwhelm by learning to easily hack our physiology so that our brain works more efficiently and we get better results in our business. So why me? What makes me eligible to talk about stress management for high achievers? So my career path is a little different. It started out at Health Canada as a regulator. After a few years, I realized I wanted to be on the other side of the fence in the private sector. It's really where all the fun was being had. So I crossed over to the biopharmaceutical industry, working for some impactful companies, working my way up the corporate ladder. And for me, I came out of the gate sort of running with this addiction, really this need to succeed. Looking back, I was absolutely a high functioning anxiety. I had high functioning anxiety, but this from the outside looked like success, right? I looked like I was doing really well in my career. And my role in regulatory meant that I was always in the middle of this intense push to get the next blockbuster drug approved by Health Canada. So it was incredibly stressful. I was pushing myself hard on all levels, personally as well. And I ended up having really severe digestive issues, similar to what a lot of panelists talked about today. And ended up in the hospital actually for 2 weeks straight. And my doctor gave me 2 choices. He said, quit your job, you got to stress less, or prepare for ongoing autoimmune health issues. And so I didn't like either of those choices. I wasn't ready to give up my career. So I went and I did a little journey into personal development, into health. You name it, I probably tried it. I dove deep into yoga, meditation, all sorts of body work. And I got certified. So, my type A personality, when I try something, I really dive deep. And so I got certified as a meditation teacher. I got certified in biofeedback techniques. And so at the end, when I boiled it all down, it came to the connection between the mind and the body. And learning to self-regulate my emotional response was the game changer for me. So then going back into my role and going back into the corporate world, I found myself being able to thrive, continue advancing my career, and keep my health intact. And I felt a lot better doing it, right? My experience of my life was just much more fulfilling. Along the way, I had my baby girl. There she is living her best life at her cake smash. And so what I do in my company, Heart Vista Performance, is I help people that are upstream from that burnout not get there. And those that are experiencing it, I help them reverse that. Because success and burnout are not synonymous. It's not the price that we just have to pay. So the reality is there are so many demands on you, and as founders especially, right? And so when we're operating from stress, we're operating from fear, we start making bad decisions for our business. We start seeing less than optimal outcomes from those decisions, which increases our anxiety, and then the cycle of chaos continues. And especially as founders, you guys have so much drive. You have incredible drive. You're founding these companies, you're making things happen. And inevitably, this is going to put so much pressure, right? It puts a lot of pressure on yourselves to succeed and to deliver, which is part of what makes you successful. But the key is to make sure that pressure stays productive, right? And where that pressure is getting in the way of you delivering your best, and as a leader, then it comes to trying to find an approach to manage your stress that's going to be sustainable. Because the reality is, you have to be learning and growing faster than the growth of your business. So how do you do that? How do you keep going? How do you stay effective without getting sick? How do you avoid being burnout Bob? This was me, burnout Bob right here. So high level answer is resilience. And so in the context of this presentation here, we're going to define resilience as the capacity to prepare for, recover from, and adapt in the face of stress, challenge, or adversity. So really, really interesting research coming out of or done in collaboration with the US Army. Why is it that we have 2 soldiers in the same platoon, they go to war, when one comes back, they come back with severe PTSD and the other one doesn't? Is it genetics? Is it luck? And can you train for it? So research shows that resilience can be trained for. And the reason that it can be trained for is because resilience is directly correlated to the balance of your nervous system. So the soldier that came came back from war without PTSD, he was less influenced by his experience of war because his nervous system was more imbalanced. So what does that mean? Let's break it down. Imagine the temperature setting on the thermostat of your wall in your house. If it's set to 23 degrees, that's the baseline temperature that it's maintaining in your house. Now imagine that it's February, Toronto, blizzard, -20 outside. The people in the house with their thermostat set to 23 are going to be more resilient to the cold, right? While the house next door that has their thermostat set to 10 degrees, they're not going to fare as well. So we apply that to the business world, to your environment as founders in this sort of chaotic world you find yourself in. The person that's more resilient, that steps into the role being more resilient or learns to build their capacity for resilience, which we're going to talk about, is going to perform better. They're going to think more clearly. They're going to be more creative. They're going to see better results. Okay, so how do we increase our capacity for resilience? So I invite you to think about your resilience as the amount of energy you've stored in an inner battery, right? All day, multiple times a day, we check in on the battery life on our phone, right? We want to make sure we have enough battery to let us do what we need to do within that day. But how often are we checking in on that personal energy, right? You have to understand and manage that inner battery. You have to know how to recharge it. You have to know what to do when it's completely depleted, right? And so unlike a phone battery, if you take care of your internal battery, the capacity or the amount of energy you can fill it with starts to increase. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a little time and we're going to learn to take care of our inner battery. So I'm going to invite you to think about, we're going to explore a concept called coherence. And I want to invite you to think about if there's been days when you've been in flow, or even parts of a day when you're in flow, when everything feels like it's really going right? Stressors come at you, but you know what? You deal with it. You go on to the next. Nothing sort of phases you. So here, what we're doing is we're creating that flow state on purpose in the moment with our eyes open. And that flow state is what we call coherence. Coherence just means that all our bodily systems are working together harmoniously, including the heart and the brain. They're aligned and they're working together, right? And we can also think of coherence as just being in balance. So here on the slide, you have a team rowing in unison, where they're working together harmoniously, they're using their energy efficiently. If they weren't rowing in sync, they would be wasting a lot of energy and probably going off course, right? So what does coherence have to do with cognitive performance? So to understand that, let's look at how the close connection between the emotions that we have and our heart rhythms. So our heart rhythms actually reflect how we're currently feeling, our emotional state. So this is research that was done on a participant. She was instructed to bring up emotions of frustration, irritation on the left-hand side. And you see her heart rhythms become really chaotic, right? We call this an incoherent heart rhythm. And then moments later, she was instructed to start feeling appreciation or calm or ease. So positive, uplifting emotion, whatever she could muster at that time. And when she shifted into those uplifting feelings, her heart rhythm changed to a more ordered pattern. So we call this a coherent heart rhythm. And what this tells us is that we can consciously, on purpose, affect our heart rhythm pattern. So at this point, you might be thinking like, okay, that's nice. I mean, thanks for sharing, but I have an important meeting with my investors tomorrow. How is this going to help me think more clearly and make better decisions, right? Well, I'm glad you asked, because the reason this is important is because our heart and our brain communicate. We have a lot of research that shows that the heart sends more neural signals or more information through the vagus nerve, through the nervous system, into the brain than the other way around. So this fact is really important because the quality of those signals that are sent from the heart to the brain have really profound effects on how our brain functions. It's going to affect mental clarity, focus, decision-making. And what's happening essentially is our brain is interpreting the signals from the heart. So this is why we focus in my work so much on the rhythms of the heart. Because if we can learn to shift the rhythms of the heart for being incoherent to coherent, like in that previous slide, you can quickly, on demand, in the moment, with eyes open, in a meeting, start to improve brain function and along that stress, anxiety, and overwhelm. So essentially, this is your little secret in your back pocket. The heart is the doorway that unlocks the executive functioning parts in our brain. And this has long-term benefits when we practice, where we start to operate from a place of emotional composure. The baseline on that thermostat on the wall starts to shift. So here's where it all comes together in the real world. Okay, let's bring it from the sky to the street. So research shows that the optimal performance curve, so you see the blue line right there, where this person is exposed to sustained challenge, stress, adversity, right? But they're able to maintain a good level of performance, of output, of result, right? Versus the person, sorry, and then that blue line, why that person's able to maintain that level of performance is because they've learned to self-regulate their emotional response to stress. Versus the person that's represented, the experience of the person represented by the red line, they end up going into breakdown or burnout. And so the only difference in this study between those two experiences was that one person was able to learn to self-regulate. And now we know what self-regulation means in the context of what we're talking about is learning to shift the rhythms of the heart. It's going to send a different neural message to the brain. And you're going to react differently to that stressor. So achieving success in your venture does not have to lead to burnout. That's the good news. It's all about learning to change your response to the chaos around you. Because chances are no matter how wildly successful your venture becomes, and I hope it does, your future probably won't be calm, right? It's just part of the reality of scaling and building a business. So as the leader of your company, being able to emotionally self-regulate is really a strategic imperative for your success. And so the great news is that we can quickly learn to get into this calm, flow, balanced state. So if you guys are ready, I want to take you through a quick little technique that's going to help you fill up that inner battery and give you more resilience. So I'm going to walk you through the steps. This is an introductory technique. It's called quick coherence that I walk through my clients through at the beginning. It has 2 steps. So the first step is we're going to focus all our attention in the area of the heart. And we're going to breathe through the heart. So what that means, we're envisioning the breath that's flowing in and out of the heart or chest area. And we're going to slow our breathing down. And we encourage people to find a rhythm that's comfortable for them. And so the second step is to bring up or embody an uplifting emotion, such as appreciation or care or, whatever is accessible to you today for someone or something in your life. And this will all make a little more sense as I guide you through. But now that you know what we're doing here, right? We're shifting our heart rhythm patterns to start to affect the connection between our heart and the brain so we can access some of those executive parts of our brain that usually shut down. And Ernest explained that beautifully. They usually shut down when we're in stress response. All right, so I am going to invite you, if you're more comfortable, feel free to turn off your cameras. So we are going to close our eyes. And this is a technique that as my clients learn, they start doing it with their eyes open. That's the ultimate goal. But at the beginning, it's a lot easier to focus with the eyes closed. And I'm going to ask you to put your hands on your chest. And if you're in your emails, if your attention got distracted, I invite you to come back. This is about a 3-minute exercise, and I think you'll get a lot out of it. So let's begin by focusing our breath. coming in and out of our nose as best we can. And let's take an inhale to the count of 5 and an exhale to the count of 5. So we'll inhale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we'll exhale to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we'll inhale to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And exhale to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I want you to shift your attention and focus your attention in the area of the heart. And visualize your breath as flowing in and out of your heart or chest area. As you continue the slow-paced breathing. So we'll inhale through the heart center and exhale through the heart center. Relax the tongue in your mouth as you inhale through your heart center and exhale through your heart center. And relax any tension in your shoulders, your back, your hands. And now as you continue heart-focused breathing, we're going to bring up uplifting emotions of appreciation, care, or compassion for someone or something in your life. Perhaps you feel it like a warm hug. Perhaps it's the sense of falling into your bed at the end of a long day, feeling fully supported in that moment. And perhaps you feel a sense of warmth around you as you're embodying appreciation, care, compassion. And continue breathing in through the heart center and out through the heart center. So by continuing heart-focused breathing and experiencing this uplifting feeling, your heart rhythm begins to take on that coherent, harmonious pattern. Your heart and your brain begin to synchronize. You're creating a new baseline for calm and emotional composure. You're creating a new temperature baseline on that wall thermostat. And we'll inhale through your heart center and exhale through your heart center. And when you're ready, open your eyes and come back to the space in which you're in. So I invite you to really notice what feels different in your body, if anything. So sometimes the first time people do this, it may not physically feel as a difference, but physiologically be sure that changes are happening. So there's a carryover effect that occurs and a cascade of 1,400 biochemical changes happening in your body. So this is a really great technique to prep to do before you go into an event that you think is going to be stressful. And so think about what would it mean for you to have more of these coherent moments, right? What would it feel like to go into meetings knowing that you have this little secret to stay composed and make better decisions? And so with my clients I work with, we also use something called biofeedback technology. What it does is it's a little sensor that clips onto your ear, and it's taking your heart rate variability and measuring your actual coherence levels in real time. And so what we use it for is to use it for resilience training, to develop this internal reference of what heart rhythm coherence actually feels like. So when you're out in the real world, you can easily learn to reset your system when you get strung out or experience a lot of overwhelm or stress. And so this actual technology, it's used by the US Navy SEALs for their resilience training. It's really great technology, very precise. So what I want to leave you with is, as founders, is, you want to be steady, growing, and effective. I hope that this panel today provided a lot of different options, because reality is, you've got places to go, places to be. You don't have time to be stuck in the overwhelm and the anxiety. And there are so many options for you, should you choose to move forward with any of them. And so I want to thank everyone for listening in. I know I went 2 minutes over, but thank you, Taylor. Big shout out to Taylor for organizing this event. I created a version of what we did today in terms of our practice. So that's the QR code on the left. Feel free to just enter your email and you'll get that one. If anyone wants to chat a little bit more, how this work could be useful for them, feel free to book a discovery call. And for any of the mentors, if you have founders that you think would benefit from this work, feel free to get in touch. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Sonia. That was really awesome. Can my Apple Watch not get you the data in like an accurate enough format, or does it need to be like a really advanced sensor in order to get that kind of data?
Oh, such a good question. Yeah. So what a lot of the sensors on the market, like Apple Watch, Fitbit, they're looking at your heart rate variability, right? And they're telling you how much heart rate variability you have, which is an indicator of cardiovascular and overall health. But what this sensor is doing is it's looking at the rhythm or the pattern of your heart rate variability. So it's one step ahead of that. And so that is what allows us to tell us the coherence level or how balanced your nervous system is. And that's what we work with, really. So it's one step extra of information that is really what's needed to train in resilience and have those positive effects in your physiology.
Fascinating. I'm imagining a future world where Elon's stress levels are directly translated to shareholders in the open market. No. Okay, cool. So that was awesome. Thank you so much. Really cool. Let's see how many people we still have in the room. It looks like I think we can actually just go ahead and open it up for question and answers. If anyone has a question, they can go ahead and stick their hand up with the little emoji, and I will ask them to unmute. And then they can come on in. Let's see. No burning questions. That's okay. I kind of anticipated that this was going to be the case because of the way that the session was timed. And also I know a lot of people, I'm sure, had to jump off at 12. Oh, there's one, Anas. Okay. Let me see how I can find you and then unmute you. I'm sorry that it's this way. Unfortunately, last time there we go. I'm just asked you to unmute.
Hey, hello everyone. Amazing presentations. Lots of beautiful insight and personal wisdom that you guys shared with us. Since we're all working towards a sustainable future, right? Like everyone is looking to propagate in that direction. How do you, in terms of storytelling, when you're presenting, how do you just not make it sound like fluff or redundant, or how do you keep people still excited about the endeavor that you're going through, whatever you're trying to achieve through your business? How do you keep people motivated and keep the story very interesting? Because over time I just feel like sometimes it feels like fluff to myself too. When I'm presenting my own product or service, I'm just thinking it seems kind of very much heard of or something like that. So
I felt there was this dissonance that came out where things was going great on the back end, but I still had to rep this great phrase to it, and I struggle with that too. So I invite any of the panelists to jump in. Don't unmute yourself, otherwise I won't be able to get you back.
Oh, okay.
Well, yes, you as well on this.
It's I can jump in a little bit because I mean it sounds like around storytelling and capturing someone. I mean that's, to me it's a case of looking at the art of the pitch, like how to effectively pitch what you're doing, which always is tweaked a little bit according to the audience, but should always touch on what you do and how and the why and the impact of it. You touched on a sustainable future, and I feel like whenever we can put it I mean I'm talking about this through the lens of being like all the work that I did with in the sustainability space and pitching. And I felt like whenever I was able to articulate the problem I was solving in a way that anyone would be able to resonate with it, like your grandmother can understand it. And then it does capture people and having slightly different pitches, like I said, according to who you're talking to. Like if you're talking to an investor and you're talking to them about the financial opportunity of your business, is going to be a little bit different than like, let's say I'm pitching like my dog treat company and I'm talking to a dog owner. I'm going to have a slightly different pitch that's like, we're like making this product that's totally different in the pet space and is really healthy, unlike, and you're speaking to the problem that your customer or the person you're talking to has. If it's an investor, they want to make money, plus they want to likely have an impact. It depends. Most want to have an impact. But then I also feel like one exercise that I would personally recommend, and then I'm curious what everyone else has to say, that's just specific to like getting absolute clarity on how you're pitching and how you're speaking to the problem, that I love to do, is writing out every single problem the person that's listening to you likely has, if it's like a customer, because then the way that you are communicating, and the way also this goes for copy as well. Like it's really easy to have really vague copy that we feel excited about when we're pitching it, but then to the other person reading it, it needs to resonate. It needs to resonate and speak to the words that they're thinking in their own head, like the problems of a dog owner versus the problems of an investor. So my thoughts finishing that are just to get absolute clarity on the keywords and the problems that who you were speaking to have. Like I know for me, when I audit all of the transcripts of the consults I have, the word overwhelm is used far more than the word stress by entrepreneurs. So I lean into the word overwhelm and it resonates with people more.
Love that, Lucy. Thank you. Janet, did you want to jump in as well? No? Okay. Grant, do you have a question? I am unmuting you.
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. Appreciate this session. Even though I'm on the mentor side, I still see the stress. So I'm keenly interested in seeing a healthier way forward for founders so they become, as everybody said, more resilient. Really one for Sonia. What have you noticed when people have implemented what you're doing for them in their change in either behavior, success, or their life-work balance, or especially now we've got a lot of remote or hybrid work environments. What are you seeing?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. A lot of the different modalities, there's so much out there, right? And it's hard to find what's right for you. But one thing I know is that we can't think our way out of stress. We would have done that a long time ago if we could, right? So that's why, a lot of what I share about is our physiology and understanding how our body works and where we're operating from. So, something that in my early days was like affirmations. I'm going to just say I'm feeling good, I'm feeling calm. But if that doesn't ring true in my body and my visceral experience, that's never going to land. It's not going to make those long-term changes to how you show up, how you think, how you react, right? And so that's where changing the emotional input into your body really makes sense. And having a step-by-step process, coaching is really helpful in that, is having the accountability, and that process, working with someone that's able to get you from A to B. It decreases the timeline a lot more than if you're working by yourself. And so in my case with my method is I've got 30 years of research behind this. There's 500 independent published articles that speak to the efficacy. And so because we're not just working with the cognitive, we employ the emotional as well. We employ the heart-based resilience training. So yeah, I hope that kind of answers your question a little bit, it's a big topic for sure.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, if there's any case studies you got or something else that would be shared out, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I will. Absolutely. Based on congregate data, what we see in my process is stress, anxiety, overwhelm decreasing by up to 53% in about a 6 to 8 week program that I run my clients through. And so it's really about that, is, you know, coming committed, ready to do the work, and being willing to do what's needed to transform and you know, start experiencing life differently, because that's what it was for me. It was that big shift when I started to really take this seriously.
I want to
Right.
build on that to another question, kind of to the whole panel, if that's okay, in that, you know, like, why aren't founders getting the help that they need? Yeah, I mean, everyone here, all of you are working with founders who are getting the help that they need. But I guess, like, why aren't some founders willing to do that? And I say that as someone who has his own mental blocks, and, you know, thankfully now has got a lot of therapy.
I'm
But
happy to jump in.
yeah,
And
please.
yeah, so there is some research and like Canada specific of what prevents founders. And like we find that to be pretty true in the work we do. So first one, and it's also interesting because when you ask founders, like, what do you need? What gets in the way? Often the answer is like, nothing gets in the way. But then it's like, okay, but why haven't you reached out? And concern for reputation is the number one reason. And so concern, especially if they're in like pitch rounds or they're associated with accelerators or capacity builders where there is funds associated with it, that makes it less likely that they'll reach out and get support. Second one is knowing where and how to access support that's really specific to them. And so, you know, therapy and coaches is helpful, and I always encourage everyone, but like was kind of touched in some of the presentations today, sometimes if people aren't aware or familiar with, you know, the journey that founders go through, they might unintentionally provide support that's not as helpful to them. So knowing where and how to access support, but again, support that's specifically tailored to them. And then the third one is funds, right? Like quality care. In Canada, unfortunately, you know, mental health and therapy is not always paid for. And if you're a founder, an entrepreneur, you may not have benefits, and benefits also sometimes are not the most robust either. And so finance is, you know, the third reason that prevents people from getting access to those services. So I think that's why we, you know, definitely put some emphasis on capacity builders in the ecosystem, making sure, okay, how are they helping that be accessible? And also startups themselves, how are we using this and leveraging some of the resources we have as a team to make this accessible for especially our leadership team? Yeah, hopefully that helps answer some of the more like research perspective that we also find to be true.
That's really great. Thank you. Ernest, did you want to jump in as well? Oh, I got to unmute you again, don't I? Sorry.
Sorry about that. That was my bad because I didn't go off on mute last time. The question was in regards to why do founders don't not get support?
You like, yeah, like, well, I guess what's really stopping them from doing it. And, you know, today, you know, it's interesting for me because I want to obviously make this session. I want to make it happen.
Yeah.
But I have to email it out to them. And I'm already, you know, in that moment, I'm competing for their attention. And so, you know, how do I get them to just do it? And because I want them all to succeed, and Foresight wants them to succeed, and we want to be able to get them that help. But if they don't come and get it, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I want to touch on a couple of things. So, Anas asked us earlier, if you're looking to improve your pitch or story, check out this book. It's called Story Wars by Jonah Sachs. It's an older one. It will give you some structure in regards to how you can actually structure how you speak in a way that it will be well received by your audience. It's called Story Wars, and there's a few other books that I would recommend to people when they're refining their pitch and really dialing into their story and doing it. I coached for TEDx here last week or a couple of weeks ago, and so we can dive into that if you want. So in regards to like why people in general and especially founders don't reach out for help, I find that oftentimes it's people that tend to be first-time founders that have a firm belief that they can do it all themselves. That oftentimes you don't reach out for help until you hit a wall. And And I found that in coaching, in therapy, in all kinds of different things. I found I myself have done that. And it's only after you've had that impact that you're like, well, shit, now what? And so it's usually at that time that you actually start looking to see who can actually support you. And it's unfortunately the way it is, because there's no replacement for that experience. You know, I can tell you that you need a coach, or I can tell you that you can need a therapist, but if you yourself don't feel inspired to do so, then it's not going to happen, or you're not going to get the benefit. If you're not in it, you're not in it. I found that for myself when I was going through therapy as well. I like to get the benefits of it. I have to be in. I have to make the decision. I have to make the choice. And so unfortunately for a lot of founders, it's like it's only happens after they've had an experience where they actually needed help that they recognize the benefit of it.
Janet, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, similar, but with, different language. So where do we put our attention as founders? Outside ourselves, right? We have all of our energy, but it's really into, it's into all of our product lines. It's into creating product lines or services, being out there for everybody. Doing this work is an internal piece of us. It's a total flip on the other side, and taking time for oneself. So it's not about family and organizing logistics for family and being present for suppers and organizing suppers. This is the hardest work we do, which is, Ernest said, you have to be in it. But it's a big shift in where we put our attention and where we put our energy. And so that is not a direct, the time you put in initially may not give you benefits right away. It's a long time journey. And so in a short-term focus that we live our lives daily, how do we kind of shift ourselves to make place for that? And so we procrastinate. We might have coaches and we go see coaches and we want the coaches. I have so many clients that come to me and say, well, tell me what to do. I say, this is not a mentor conversation. You can wait to have coaching, but they really come wanting me to say, tell me what they want them to do. But part of coaching is taking that time to do your own work and, talking about all of the constraints but also the possibilities and, what can you do in the short little steps, right? The small acts forward. But external focus versus internal, and how big a shift that is. I know it's been for me to refocus myself onto myself in order to do my own work. And it's a daily struggle, but results begin to be seen.
Yeah, the body keeps score. I love that phrase. Sonia.
Yeah, I wanted to add that, a piece of this is also the self-worth, because as business owners, how you feel about yourself becomes so connected to the success of your business. And so when times are tough or things are going south, we start to, feel bad about ourselves. And when you're in that state, you don't feel that reaching out for help will it even help, right? Like, does it even make any sense? But that's really when it's going to make the biggest impact, right? Because when the days are good and when you're having a good day, it's easy. But when you're having a bad day or a hard season, that's really when having a coach, having a mentor can get you to the other side, and realizing that you are not your business. You are worthy much more than the margins, than the profits. Yeah, it's a piece of the puzzle.
Oh, that one gave me chills. That one gave me that you're digging right into the wound, because that's exactly what happened, is that I totally lost a sense of self and worth without the business success. What was I worth? Lucy's been really brave in sharing her experience about that I wasn't quite as brave in sharing all of mine. It's really tough. Any other questions coming up? Or Janet, did you perhaps have a question? You still got your hand up there. I'm not sure. No? Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, because of the way that this works, everyone who watches it will be able to pause and see your contact information. But regardless, I would like to send her an email with this recording as well as all of your decks. So if you haven't already sent me your deck, please send it over. And that way I can include all this in the format. But really, I mean, ultimately the goal of today, I am amazed by how well you all came together to deliver such a cohesive, structure for everyone to go through, because I actually think it all came really well together for founders, just to realize not only that there's so much help that they can go out and get, but there's people who have that lived experience of exactly what they're going through. When I was with Foresight 5 years ago, we could not use our EIR hour to talk with a counselor. That was not something that could happen. And so I'm really pumped that we now have that availability open through Janet, as well as a couple other EIRs that we've got, as well as this mentor program that allows you to at least meet and feel out some different individuals and get some coaching from them on a volunteer basis just to start. And then of course we have all this, we have this incredible network of all these great people who are here dedicating their whole careers to helping entrepreneurs perform at that exceptional executive level. And so I'm really pleased to bring them into Foresight and hope to cultivate lots of connections between everybody in the coming weeks. And especially because of this recorded content is going to be available and part of our learning management system and onboarding, how do you build resilience as an entrepreneur, its own kind of module there that I can continue to direct people to, essentially over the next year. Perhaps we'll do it again at this time next year. I don't know. This is the beauty of them giving me creative freedom to run my own events. They don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, so that's great. And I guess, if anyone else has any other final questions, we'll let you all go. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for putting this together, Taylor. It was really nice to see you, and it's really nice to meet everybody else.
Thank you so much, presenters. You guys are just so awesome. Like really, like top tier, really great presentations. And I just I'm thrilled, and I know that that there's a lot of people internal to Foresight and a lot of the advisors who feel that they don't know how to have these conversations, and being able to send this recording alone is actually going to be a big step forward for the founder, being able, when they're struggling, they do go to their EIR, and often the EIR doesn't have that training and doesn't know what to do with that and how to really help them, because they can't. And then they're only allowed to even advise them. They're not even really supposed to get dirty and do the work as part of the funding agreements and how Foresight works. So yeah, Helen, awesome to have you. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks so much, Taylor. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Taylor. This was amazing. And the turnaround was what? Within a week? That's what we had a little over a week.
That's why it's Founder Friday. That's
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how some people are looking at me like, how the hell is this guy doing? He wants to do something every Friday. He's insane. But yeah, I guess some things haven't changed. I've still got eyes in my mouth or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
It's possible. We did it.
We did it. Yeah. Thanks. Have a great day, all.
And we're still doing it. Yeah.
See you all.
Bye.
Bye.